A few excerpts from our Father's love letter to his children. And the love letter in part reads, I am your Father, and I love you, even as I love my Son, Jesus. For in Jesus my love for you is revealed. He is the exact representation of my being. He came to demonstrate that I am for you, not against you, and to tell you that I am not counting your sins. Jesus died so that you and I could be reconciled. His death has the ultimate expression of my love for you. I gave up everything I loved him, that I might gain your love. Yes, if you receive the gift of my Son Jesus, you receive me. And nothing will ever separate you from my love again. Come home, and I will throw the biggest party heaven has ever seen. My question is, the Father's asking, will you be my child? I am waiting for you. Let us pray. Father, we just want to thank you for loving us so, that God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. Lord, we pray in Jesus' name that you will love the world through us, and you will help us to be what we ought to be for Jesus Christ. Now we thank you for all you have done for us. You have brought us from a mighty long way. You have brought us from darkness into your marvelous light. And we thank you for using our brethren and sisters in such an honorable fashion. Get glory for yourself now. Be exalted, be magnified, be glorified. In whose name? In Jesus' name. Let us pray together the prayer he taught his disciples to pray, saying, Our Father, art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those, and lead us not in temptation, but deliver us from all evil. For thine is the kingdom, power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. God loves you, and so do I. Amen.
Morning, honorable members. I also would like to take this opportunity to wish all of our fathers in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas a happy Father's Day, and also by extension to all our viewers around the world, all the fathers around the world, a happy Father's Day. We wish also at this time to recognize that without the consent of our mothers, there would be no fathers. And so we also extend greetings to the wonderful women in our lives. When the business of the House suspended yesterday evening, the honorable member for Fox Hill had reserved the floor. And so if we are ready to continue, perhaps the member for Bamboo Town can indicate. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
The honorable member for Foxhill had reserved the time for the honorable member for South Beach, who will take the floor.
Yes. The chair recognizes the honorable member for South Beach.
I stand in the firm established awareness of the mighty I Am consciousness, in whose being I live and move and have my very own. I also stand, Mr. Speaker, on the authority of the magnificent electors of South Beach, who graciously endowed me on May 10th past with the privilege of being their Member of Parliament. And I had experienced and have experienced a charity, welcome, and hospitality of gracious regard that exceeds my greatest deservings. And I am further grateful, sir, to a host of beings without whose intimate and extensive support this day would not have been possible. Mr. Speaker, I was born and raised in Camp Road, New Providence. I say that repeatedly because during my childhood, I was often reminded, or maybe informed, but reminded by those whom I had reposed a certain trust and confidence and respect, that nothing good comes out of Camp Road. I invite them, some long past, to take a look at Camp Road now. I was reared, Mr. Speaker, by my paternal grandmother. She was a large, strapping white woman with an equally large disposition and a strident, no-nonsense attitude. And I was brought up in a rather disciplined and austere environment, exceeded only, Mr. Speaker, by the faithful assurance that she and my father gave me at all times that I was loved beyond measure. You see, sir, I was the first in my family to attain and accomplish many things. A high school diploma, college degree, so on, including today the first in my family to be a member of Parliament. First in my family to be a member of the cabinet. So this day stimulates in me a deep sense of gratitude for my grandmother, Lita Lloyd, my parents, Eltoy and Stanford, to whom I owe my life and all that has flowed in since my birth. To my wife, Michelle, Donna Marie, who has been my rock and my steadying barometer, my children, Aisha, my first pain, Kendra, Shiva, or this be daddy pain, I don't get it. Or daddy is have morning sickness too, Mrs. Speaker. They need to understand that. Let them know. Thank you very much, Noah Abaku. My daughters, Kendra, Shiva, Shakti, Sanjay, my grandchildren, Alvante, Alex, Andreas, Drew, and one yet unnamed, Mr. Speaker, who still remains in the oven. My brothers, Rodney and Charles, my sister, Christina, and cousins who were like siblings, growing up in Camp Road, Daphne, and Deborah, and Yvonne, and Choppy, and Sheba, Adrienne, and their families. I'm always and remain forever grateful for their unwavering admiration and encouragement. My many friends, indeed, Mr. Speaker, you yourself, who played a very powerful and intimate and influential role in helping to cause this day to be. I am grateful to you, sir. I'm also grateful, Mr. Speaker, to my South Beach team, dedicated, patriotic, and loyal adherents and supporters, led by Dr. Elizabeth Darville. The association's executive team, led by Mr. Luther Rowland, Tony Albury, Sherry Albury, Verdell, they are not related, Verdell Williams, Adrienne Smith, and a man for whom I have grown with the greatest regard, Mr. Lindsey Williamson. These members and many more are a candidate's and now a member of Parliament's dream. They have extended to me, sir, a benefit that I could never repay. Consequently, today, through their unselfish and expert efforts, I am their member of Parliament, and I thank them. Mr. Speaker, my former St. Augustine's College High School colleague is today the Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I like to punctuate certain statements of mine by saying St. Augustine. You know, Mr. Speaker, we don't have to say the St. Augustine's College. Some have to say the government, but never. Mr. Speaker, and with great regard, with great respect, nothing. Mr. Speaker, I'm reminded to give great honor and gratitude to the Prime Minister who caused on May 15, 2017, that I would be his chief advisor in education, and therefore today I'm the Minister of Education. I am grateful. I'm also reminded, Mr. Speaker, every time I am caused to reflect upon the member for Angliston, the honorable member, my beloved friend. Mr. Speaker, there were days of yore when her father and my mother locked elbows together on the campaign and political trail, championing the causes of liberation and the advancement of our people. You see, so I was born, as it were, in a political household. My mother was an original member of the Progressive Liberal Party. Not a founding member, but one of the original members early on in the 50s with the late Sir Henry Milton Taylor. And through that association, she came into friendship, close friendship, with the member of Parliament, the honorable member for Angliston's father, the Honorable Arthur Dion Hanna. So I'm not new, as it were, to political warfare. So, sir, I stand grateful today for this awesome privilege that has been accorded to me by the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I want to say, too, to my constituents in South Beach, males, and you have identified the females, Mr. Speaker, a blessed and wonderful Father's Day. Thank you very much. I wish to extend, sir, to the families of Miss Raquel Morley, families of Mr. Wenzel Thompson and Anita Roll, whose family members have passed on to their eternal reward. Our condolences on my behalf and behalf of our team and our families are extended to them. Mr. Speaker, it is no secret that the established education system in the Bahamas is unable to meet the needs of a 21st century society, one that is in constant state of flux and evolution, one that is unfortunately saddled with outmoded and outdated educational methods, one that is still seized with the mantra or the paradigm of, quote, one size fits all. And even though that is no longer true, Mr. Speaker, we continue to teach that way. It seems as if we value information, as crucial and vital as that is, more than we value skill and creativity. We in this country, sir, are too focused, in my estimation, on this thing called the D average, without fully understanding what this D average indicates. And generally, so people, you're not sufficiently involved in the process of education and the lives of our children and the student population. So let it be clear, sir, that it is our mandate, which we take very seriously, to transform our country through education into a knowledge-based society. And by that, it has been defined by the Organization for American States that we mean to treat knowledge as a commodity that can be traded for our country's economic prosperity. Knowledge-based societies rely on the knowledge of their citizens to drive the innovation, entrepreneurship, and dynamism of that society's economy. This focus of this government, as we seek, will be to revamp the Bahamian education system in the next 5 years and in perpetuity. Sir, like the old adage states, the first step in solving a problem is admitting that you have one. So, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to education, sir, we have a problem. The deficiencies in our system, sir, in failing to effectively equip our young people to meet the needs of the 21st century economy are well documented. National examinations, specifically the GLAT, BJC, and BGC SE examinations, coupled with the graduation rates from the past few years, reveal that at every assessment level and at the point of exiting school, too many of our students are failing to meet the basic requirements of knowledge and skill. Let's take a look at the examination results as an example, Mr. Speaker. The year 2016 marked the 24th sitting of 3 national exams. The Grade Level Assessment Test, or GLAT, the Bahamas Junior Certificate Exam, or BJC, and the Bahamas General Certificate of Secondary Education, the BGCSE. In 2016, 5,428 third grade students across the Bahamas sat the GLAT exam in English and mathematics. In those subjects, Mr. Speaker, less than 65% of those sat that exam got a grade of A to D. Over 37% failed. At the 6th grade level, Mr. Speaker, approximately 5,053 candidates registered to sit exams for 4 subjects. The 4 subjects that were offered: English, math, science, and social studies. Those grades were even worse. Less than 60%, Mr. Speaker, received grades A through D. A startling 40% failed. At both the 3rd and 6th grade levels, sir, female students continue to outperform male students, achieving higher percentages at the upper grade levels, while our young men continue to achieve higher percentages at the lower grade level. Simply put, Mr. Speaker, more of our males are failing than females. Let's look at the BJC exam. In 2016, 11,703 candidates from a total of 120 centers registered to sit the BJC exams for 11 subjects offered. These candidates came from 68 independent centers and 52 public schools. Mr. Speaker, and BJC, 64.3% were awarded grades between A and D. 35.7%, clearly 1 out of every 3, failed. In 2016, Mr. Speaker, a mere 20%, that is 2,240 candidates, achieved a minimum grade of D or higher in 5 or more BJC subjects. 1 out of every 5. Let's look at the BGCSE. 2016, 6,450 candidates were registered, 104 centers. That's 65 centers independent, 39 public. Mr. Speaker, although the total number of subjects offered were 27, the average number of subjects written per candidate was 4. 4 in 2016, 5 in 2015 for the average number. English language, biology, mathematics, and religious studies have remained the subjects of choice for the vast majority of candidates. No group of candidates, however, has 100% subscriptions in all of these areas. In 2016, Mr. Speaker, our public needs to hear this, only 1,459, or 23% of the candidates, obtained a minimum D grade in 5 subjects or more. That is less than 1 in every 4. A total of 903 candidates received at least a C in 5 or more subjects. In other words, Mr. Speaker, 1 in 6, 14% of the candidates that registered to take the BGCSE exams received at least a C in 5 or more subjects. Now here's why that is important, sir. You need at least 5 subjects with a C grade to go to the University of the Bahamas. Let's get this, Mr. Speaker. In 2015, 5,000 students sat the English, 5,400 students sat the English language exam. 65% failed. 2015. 2015, Mr. Speaker, 5,200 students sat the math exam. 75%, Mr. Speaker, failed. Now, some will argue that when compared to 1992, the last sitting of the General Certificate of Education, GCE, which most of us in this house know ever so well, my beloved colleague from Elizabeth would have probably passed all 15 of the ones he took, but be that as it may. When only 10% of the exit population received 5 or more subjects with an A to C grade, 10%. That's 92. 25 years later, Mr. Speaker, we have achieved a mere 4% increase in the number of students passing 5 or more with a C. In 25 years, by way of examination results, our education system is at a standstill. Which, Mr. Speaker, when you have 37% of our 3rd graders, 40% of our 6th graders failing the GLAT exam, a mere 20% of our 9th graders achieving relative success at the BJC level with 5 or more subjects with a D pass and above, and only 23% of the BGCSE candidates achieving a grade of D and above in 5 or more subjects, we cannot pretend that things are going well in education. Let's take a look at graduation, Mr. Speaker. Graduation. In 2015, Department of Education collected graduation rates from all public schools. According to the data, 3,155 students would have, quote, I don't want to say graduate because that's not fair. They marched. 50% did not make it, Mr. Speaker. Minimum requirements for graduation. 50% did not make it. Should be noted that prior to 2017, this year, the criteria for graduation was a non-standard practice across the country, where each institution, public or private, determined the criteria for graduation. A diploma from one institution meant one thing, a diploma from another institution, something else. Recognizing the need for standardized criteria for graduation, the Bahamas High School Diploma experienced its embryonic development in 1998 during the tenure of then Minister of Education, Dame Ivy Duma. It continued its development during the tenure of Minister of Education, the Honorable Alfred Sayers, in 2004, and experienced its labor pains under the Honorable Desmond Bannister in 2011. In 2014, Mr. Speaker, under Minister Jerome K. Fitzgerald, the diploma was given its birth. Over the past week, sir, and again tomorrow in Acklands, I had the honor of presenting a standardized diploma to the children of our nation. They are the first cohort of graduates of the Bahamas High School Diploma, which represents a standardized set of practices and benchmarks for student academic achievement, social development, and preparedness for the world of work or college. In order to achieve this particular diploma, Mr. Speaker, certain essential requirements had to be met. May I advise? They had to have 4 BJC passes with a C or above in English and maths, at least 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. They had to have at least a 2.0 cumulative average over the 3 preceding years, 10, 11, and 12. They had to have completed on their own 30 hours of voluntary community service and 20 hours of job readiness training, especially in soft skills. Further, Mr. Speaker, they had to attain a 90% attendance and punctuality rate over those 3 years. They could not miss a date without proper excuse or be late for 3 years. When this was first initiated, it was said that this could not be done. Last evening, Mr. Speaker, at the National Stadium, I participated in ceremonies of over 900 of our wonderful children who met and exceeded these minimum requirements. Today, we are achieving a 50% graduation rate. Within the next 12 years, Mr. Speaker, if not sooner, it is the intention of this government to achieve a graduation rate of about 85%. We will start that today, Mr. Speaker. Now, the question is this. With such a failing system, it's obvious, what do we do? Questions have to be, how do we reach our students, particularly our young men? How can we improve academic performance across the board, beginning at preschool and primary school years? Do we need more qualified teachers? Do our teachers need to be better trained? How can we enhance the curriculum to engage more students? What about the infrastructure to promote engagement? How can we drive home to our people the importance of education in the wider community so that parents and stakeholders become a part of our quest to promote lifelong learning? What we can say to you, Mr. Speaker, is this, and this is absolutely certain. Climate of academic failure, low graduation rates cannot be accepted as the norm. Our considerable investment in education, some $320 million Mr. Speaker, that we invest in education has to be accounted for in terms of value for money. According to the 2016 National Development Plan report, it stated the following, and I quote, "A significant portion of Bahamian youths are not only unemployed, but in many respects, because of substantial skills deficits, they are unemployable." Mr. Speaker. Now, how do we solve this problem? Well, let's take a look, and this problem will be solved. Mr. Speaker, as I said before, one of the first steps that we have in solving a problem is to acknowledge we got a problem. We realize more than ever that education and training of our people are key factors in progressive and sustainable economic, social, and cultural development. Lifelong learning is an economic imperative for our nation. We must, with purpose and urgency, address the present national skills deficit, improve substandard literacy, numeracy, and communication levels in our nation, promote greater inclusiveness in the education of our people, and curb chronic unemployment and unemployability with immediate effect. And to that end, Mr. Speaker, we intend to go back to the beginning. We start with preschool. In 2015, a study was published by the Inter-American Development Bank. It stated the following, and I quote, "Early childhood development programs are the foundations for successful social investments over the lifetime of an individual, especially for the poor. Investing more in this area is one of the most effective ways governments can improve economic mobility. However, the evidence indicates that this region, including the Bahamas, is spending too little on early childhood development programs. On a per capita basis, Mr. Speaker, governments are spending 3 times more on children between the ages of 6 to 11 than on those ages 0 to 5. On an average, governments in Latin America and the Caribbean, including the Bahamas, spend about $300 per year per child on early childhood. In contrast, $1,000 on middle child. Moreover, early childhood investments tend to disproportionately favor physical infrastructure, such as daycare facilities, while neglecting and training vital human capital. Our research, or rather recent research, this is the IDB continuing, shows that some of the biggest returns on investment can come from modest programs that focus on improving the critical early interactions between young children and adults, be they parents, teachers, or caregivers. Mr. Speaker, I have spoken to primary school teachers across this country, especially those who teach grades 1 and 2. They routinely lament to me the struggle that their students face who may not have had the benefit of preschool education. In fact, they advise that one of the more credible and reliable barometers of a child's eventual academic success is the introduction to the basics in preschool environments. These include, Mr. Speaker, not just literacy or numeracy or communication skills or cognitive skills, but more importantly so, emotional intelligence training. Very important. Teamwork at the most early stage of a child's life. To give them the understanding and the recognition that they are a being within a context And it is within that context that they must thrive and strive to reach their maximum efficiency. As a member of the United Nations, we in the Bahamas must be committed to improving the quality of life for our citizens through the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals. Goal number 4 calls for inclusive and equitable quality education and lifelong learning opportunities for all. For developed countries, one of the targets identified to achieve this goal, Mr. Speaker, is by the year 2030, all boys and girls have access to quality early childhood development care and pre-primary education so that they are ready for primary education. This compulsory quality pre-primary education must be delivered by well-trained educators. Now, I pause, Mr. Speaker, to emphasize this point because it is the practice in at least our society, and I think this identifies the problems elsewhere, that because we think they are little children, babies, we can just dispense with anybody to train them. That is a gargantuan mistake, Mr. Speaker. It is at that foundational and formative stage of their lives that they need the best of the best. Because it is there that the blueprint of their lives is being formed and shaped, which augurs to the personal development capabilities of them going forward, Mr. Speaker. It is the commitment of this government to ensure that that be so. Universal preschool education will provide primary, pre-primary education for all preschool children in the Bahamas. Today, Mr. Speaker, there are approximately 550 preschoolers in our public system. There are many preschoolers elsewhere in the private schools. Here's our problem, Mr. Speaker. In the public system, we simply do not have the capacity to absorb more preschoolers. In the private sector, we do not have the requisite regulations to govern what is preschool, primary education. It's a significant gap in the legal infrastructure and policy infrastructure that has to be addressed. It will be addressed in the immediate term. Because, I go back to the point I made a moment ago, sir, we are now relegating these children who should be receiving the absolute best at that stage into the hands of ill-equipped and untrained, though well-intentioned, adults. Many times, which are underpaid and under-resourced and cannot, unfortunately, deliver the requisite program of educational and social, intellectual, and cultural training. So therefore, sir, we will see to it that there will be quality preschool programs and to the expansion and development at this foundational level. Now, of course, Mr. Speaker, one of the ways in which this can be facilitated is through what we call technology, which can serve as an effective tool in the teaching and learning process of our children. Preschoolers can benefit in many ways from the inclusion of technology in the classroom. These devices can be used by the teacher in the sharing of information, of instruction, of skills and concepts, and the provision, practice opportunities for students. Preschoolers can use computers and other technological devices to acquire knowledge, learn and practice skills in groups and individually. This provides an effective strategy to meet the differentiated needs of children at all levels, from the challenged to the exceptional learner. Laptops, LCD projectors, tablets, interactive devices, and internet access must be included in all preschool classrooms. In keeping with this mandate, Mr. Speaker, to ensure the use of technology in preschool classrooms for individual students, our government is committing $2 million in this budget, 2017-18, for the introduction of a pilot program in 2 New Providence preschools, which will provide, in September, tablets for each student to be used in the delivery of instructions. $2 million. I'm going to speak more about this in a few minutes, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to technology, because I'll speak more about it, Mr. Speaker. This program, I said, it's going to be a pilot program. It's going to be carefully monitored, carefully evaluated, because it needs to be expanded as immediately as possible. At the moment, sir, the Technology Department at the Ministry of Education have identified, but will further examine, those 2 preschools to see what possibility exists now for this to be implemented so that we can be off and on running come September. I'll come to that in a moment, Mr. Speaker, but let me turn my attention and our attention to curriculum development and advancement. You and I know, sir, that this government is cognizant of the fact that the progressive and sustainable development of this country depends entirely upon the proper education and training of our people. And I am committed as the Minister of Education, sir, to achieving my government's mandate of a complete reform of our educational system. At the forefront of this, sir, is the review and revision of the curriculum. And Mr. Speaker, in the primary schools, I'm talking about ages 5, 6, 7, 8. In some instances, you have our students saddled with as many as 11, 12, even 13 subjects. Mr. Speaker, overburdened. In 2006, I believe it was, the Inter-American Development Bank sourced one of our specialists, Bahamian specialists, who now is at the College of the University of the Bahamas, who did a study and discovered that our children were being ill-served by the burden of this curriculum imposition in their lives, and recommended that no more than 8 subjects, preferably 6 subjects, should be essential subjects that they will master, that will enable them to be more than proficient in their middle years and so on. Not only that, Mr. Speaker, the curriculum is an essential component which drives the educational system of this country. And each time that there are changes in developments or developments happening around the world, the school curricula are affected. Noteworthy, sir, is the fact that it is through the curriculum that the country's national identity is preserved. So, it is the intention of my ministry to aggressively embark upon a complete review of our existing curriculum, inclusive of preschool through to high school. To that degree and extent, sir, we have earmarked $200,000 from our budget this year that will be for the commencement of that review and revision. And it is advised that this will take 2 years. But it will, Mr. Speaker, in accordance with the prescription outlined in the National Development Plan, assist us in placing us on a foundation that will take us well into the future. We will engage the services of Bahamian curriculum experts. Most important for me to emphasize that. Bahamian curriculum experts whom we have in this country. As the process unfolds, all persons throughout our society is going to be invited to make meaningful contributions. And our aim is to ensure that the curriculum is explicit, coherent, dynamic, viable, comprehensive, manageable, as well as culturally and globally relevant. According to the National Development Plan, and if you would please forgive me, I'll just say NDP, because I have to speak plenty words this morning. NDP. That Bahamian core curriculum will contain the following components. Number one, Bahamian history, civics, and culture. Bahamian. Multilingual numeracy, competence. Information technology, competence. Entrepreneurship, get this one, and I'm sure the Member of Parliament and Deputy Prime Minister would love this. Personal financial planning. Mr. Speaker, close attention will be given to the alignment of our stated outcomes to the targets of the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, which specifically refer to education. Now, as the cost of living rises, so does the cost of education. There's a dire need to increase the allocation for instructional resources. Therefore, in this budget, increased funding will be allocated to tuition supplies. But, Mr. Speaker, may I say with respect, sir, and with great understanding and love, that we are in tight economic times. I would therefore like to, on behalf of the Ministry of Education, the government of the Bahamas, and the people of the Bahamas, wish to encourage those parents who can afford it to make every effort to purchase the necessary textbook and school supplies for their children during the summer vacation. It is not the intention of the Ministry of Education to abandon or to deprive any child of those requisite supplies, materials, Mr. Speaker. We will make sure that every child is so equipped. However, there are parents, caregivers, relatives who are capable of equipping their own children and relatives in this fashion. We will introduce new initiatives in the coming budget year. And I would also like to say, Mr. Speaker, that my ministry has accepted the invitation of the Securities Commission of the Bahamas to launch a financial literacy education pilot project in public schools. This project will be introduced into 2 of our junior high schools, and the Commission, in its quest to deliver a relevant program, is liaising with the OECD, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and other financial institutions. Another initiative that has evolved as a result of our membership in the Organization of American States. During that organization's meeting, 9th Inter-American Meeting of Ministers of Education that was held at the Atlantis on Paradise Island in February of this year, so emphasis was placed on ensuring inclusive and equitable education for all. And this again speaks to the Sustainable Development Goals number 4, which itemizes and articulates education. And so it is going to be that our ministry will seek to implement the project that has been offered to us by the Securities Commission. This 2-year project is expected to improve the quality of education in the Bahamas by providing access to technology and digital resources in the primary schools. Some 10 primary schools, Mr. Speaker, are expected to participate in what is called the Pro Futuro Digital Mobile Classroom Project. This project will again assist in the advancement of technology and the use of technology throughout our schools system. And so we are proud and thankful and grateful to the Securities Commission for this assistance. Mr. Speaker, may I turn to the professional development of our teachers and educational professionals, which, sir, is a mandate of ours and a commitment of ours to the Bahamian people. We know that teacher quality is the biggest single in-school indicator of whether a student will be successful in pursuing their education. Teaching is one of the most difficult jobs in the world, and therefore requires meaningful training, preparation, and ongoing support. Mr. Speaker, greater investment in the continuous training, retraining, and professional development of teachers and educational professionals is a top priority for this government. A more robust array of professional development programs will be offered to educational stakeholders. This, we believe, sir, can prevent bad teachers from developing by putting in place measures that address the root cause of ineffective teaching, that is, meaningful training, effective tools, and ongoing support. Now, I must say, to the credit of the former Ministry and Minister of Education, that a professional development institute was established at the Mabel Walker Primary School. But, sir, it has fallen into a sad state of disrepair. It has been lacking in resources, and it is, sir, that we can advise that that facility will be restarted, resourced, and made responsive to the ever-growing demand for quality training for all our educational professionals. May I say a word, Mr. Speaker, about special education? Again, following the mandate of the National Development Plan, our own mandate, and that of the Inter-American Development Bank's Sustainable Development Goals, at least number 4, this government will enhance the provision of special education to ensure equity in education and employability of students with special needs. Key to the enhancement of special education is the specialized staff personnel to cater to the varied needs encountered by this section, the Ministry of Education. Here's what we have found, sir. We do not have sufficient trained, equipped, qualified teachers in our system who can deliver special education training and instructions to those with special needs. We do not have it. Simple as that. We therefore are required to have to go outside and recruit those students. Now, let me make a distinction, sir. There are teachers who have had some special education training. Some. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about teachers who are qualified as a vocational thrust to dispense and to train and to work with students of special needs. There's a vast, vast difference, Mr. Speaker. Vast difference. Going through the educational curriculum, you take 3 or 4 courses in special education, is not qualified you to be a special education teacher. It's very important. And that is where our emphasis has to be placed. And so, sir, we need to therefore recruit and train and to provide assistance to those interested. Those would include guidance counselors, speech therapists, school attendance officers, special education officers, school psychologists. And it is a challenge seeking to provide services with minimal staff that has been a great detriment to the provision of equitable education for all Bahamians in this country. These deficiencies will be addressed, but you understand, we understand our budgetary limitations, and they will be addressed incrementally. May I speak, sir, to the National Apprenticeship Scheme? I said to you earlier that as a part of this new Bahamas high school diploma, there needs to be certain hours, 20, of what is called job readiness training. This National Apprenticeship Scheme fits right in neatly with that, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, the government will expand the existing anemic National Apprenticeship Scheme in consultation with relevant stakeholders. All students, at the time they leave school, must be equipped with practical knowledge and skills training required in their selected field of work. At the end of this training period, the apprentices will be issued a certificate from the government of the Bahamas as proof of valid employment experience. And this apprenticeship scheme, sir, will be one of the flagship programs of this administration. Now, I said earlier, Mr. Speaker, that I will come to this subject of technology. And I would like our members and the Bahamian people to listen to me carefully, because technology today is not an option. It is the way of the world. It is an indisputable, maybe for some unpalatable fact of life. As I mentioned, in the National Development Plan, sir, the quality of life we enjoy today is dependent on our ability to take advantage of innovations in science and technology. In the Ministry of Education, sir, there is a program called STI, Science, Technology, and Innovation. It has been recognized, and it is internationally recognized, as drivers of progressive and sustainable national development, of the diversification of an economy. It is, we recognize, the catalyst for 21st century education, for world peace, for wealth generation, for food security, for poverty alleviation, for the reduction of inequality, for the reduction of unemployment, for crisis management, environmental sustainability, and for promoting health and well-being. Some also use the term STEM, Mr. Speaker, which we know as science. Some also use the term of TVET, Mr. Speaker, which is technical and vocational education and training. And some also use the term ICT. I was just trying to rest my voice. I mean, he seemed to have the answers. Mr. Speaker, information communication technology, ICT. Now, here's what is shocking, Mr. Speaker. And I don't criticize anyone, sir. I just state the facts. I have come to this House to bring full, frank disclosure of the state of education in this country. At this moment, there is no coherent technology management plan at the Ministry of Education. There is no technology management plan at the Ministry of Education. There is no technology user policy at the Ministry of Education. There is not really a clearly defined, fully functioning, coherently organized unit of technology in the Ministry of Education. Now, Mr. Speaker, hold that right there for me, sir. And recognize that I said earlier that we are going to be introducing these tablets into the hands of these preschools, into an environment in which there is no ready underpinning for them. Therefore, sir, taking the attitude of my beloved colleague, the member for North Harbour Coast, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, I have given a directive, sir, that within 30 days, I want on my desk a concept paper for the creation of a division of technology in the Ministry of Education. So that I can bring it to my colleagues, and we can discuss it and determine how we can implement it. Now, 30 days might seem like it's ambitious. Too bad. It must be done. Must be done. Because what I recognize, sir, is there are strands of something out there technology-wise that just needs a coagulating process to come together. Hard-working people who need proper and directions. SDI, sir, must be a national priority, sir. And it is the intention of the Ministry of Education to lead the way. I know that there is also an initiative underway throughout the government led by the Ministry of Finance. We are going to work obviously intimately together to ensure. Why? Because, Mr. Speaker, as my beloved colleague yesterday said, in terms of these travels overseas and so on in a time of austerity, if I may use that term, sir, when there could be video conferencing of many of these meetings in which the same benefit as having traveled to a particular place could be garnished without the concomitant costs. If we have the platforms that make it possible. So we cannot have a modern 21st century education system in the Bahamas that is responsive to national needs, that must be driven by data, sir, that equips students. Mr. Speaker, if I call for information this minute in the Ministry of Education, I cannot get it. As such, no criticism of our beloved people who work very hard, an excellent team members, wonderful. How many staff members do we have in the Ministry of Education and the Department of Education combined? Let me see. I will get back. Mr. Speaker. The click of a mouse, that should be the figure. How many buildings do we have? How many school premises do we have? How many contracts do we have now that are outstanding over time? How many buildings are under some kind of contract for repairs? Because, Mr. Speaker, I am accountable to this House and the Bahamian people. I cannot be accountable without information. I cannot make decisions, well, rather, I cannot make recommendations to our colleagues for decisions on behalf of the Bahamian people without information. Timely, up-to-date, irrefutable, empirical. Give me a couple other words. Verifiable information, Mr. Speaker. And I don't wish to presume, but I may suggest that this might be a challenge across the government service. Mr. Speaker, if we're looking for a highly skilled workforce, if we wish to be globally competitive, and in tourism and banking and financial services, we must be. Technology and innovation must be the way, sir. Must be. I must be able, my beloved colleague of Elizabeth must be able to sit at his desk, our desks, and find out whatever we want, up to the minute. So that if you or opposite members opposite, or even our own colleagues want to know, because a decision is imminent, urgent, we travel all over the world, representing the Bahamas. I just came back from a conference in Barbados, University of the West Indies. Mr. Speaker, we spend almost $5 million supporting the University of the West Indies. Almost $5 million. I would like to know how many of our students are at the University of the West Indies. I want to know, sir, so I can be honorable and accountable to my Minister of Finance as to, are we getting value for money? Yes. What are the subject areas, the disciplines in which they are now presently understudied? Are those disciplines, do they correspond to our national needs? Yes. This is the 21st century. You know, my father and his father, back in the whatever, they could manage their lives by the seat of their pants, on a whim, Mr. Speaker. But today, because what I think may not in fact be what it is. Our goal is to create an educational system that is technologically sound and competitive. And that there are a number of, I apologize for jumping up like this and stopping in a mid-sentence like that, but I am Mr. Speaker, let me just show you what I mean. I'm going to come to some more stuff later on. Mr. Speaker, we have a homeschooling environment that is growing rapidly in this country without regulation. I don't understand how that could be. The law states, according to the Education Act, that students must be 5 years of age to 16 years of age in our schools. Who gave them permission to be out there? Now, God bless homeschooling. It's wonderful. I'm not no personal, none of that. But I make this point, Mr. Speaker. There are a number of homeschooling programs in which the instruction comes from Bangladesh. I'm not saying anything wrong with Bangladesh. My point is about technology. So their teachers are not even in the Bahamas. They're being instructed in math or science or whatever, according to certain prescribed times from across the globe. I'm going to come to a point in a minute. We have students, and I'm going tomorrow to Auckland's for the National High School Diploma graduation. 1 graduate from Crooked Island, 8 from Auckland's. I'm honored to be traveling there. But we have students, because they're unable to get proper instruction, say in math or in science, have a challenge meeting these demands and these requirements. Now, Mr. Speaker, through technology, that would have been no problem. No problem. So it wouldn't have been necessary for us to travel the world looking for teachers in math and science and so on and so forth, when those students could be tuned in by way of technology. I'm coming back. I can deal with this in a minute. Now, you see, we are experiencing challenges in achieving this goal because of a lack of ICT equipment, including computers, tablets, interactive whiteboards, or what we call Promethean boards, and other educational technologies. Here's what you need to know, my beloved honorable members and Bahamian people. 10%, Mr. Brother, less than 10% of the public senior high school students today, right now, 11-15, less than 10% have access to a computer lab in our system. Less than 10%. Approximately 15 schools. In fact, were it not, Mr. Speaker, for an ICT invasion in 2011 and 2012 via the IDB Inspire program. Inspire means investing in students and programs for innovative reform and education. We wouldn't even be there. And Mr. Speaker, this is further compounded because public schools do not have the infrastructure and bandwidth needed for students to have reliable access to education or to online learning opportunities. So my ministry, sir, in collaboration with the private and public partnerships, will seek to meet the STI, Science, Technology, and Innovation. Don't make me say it again, STI, by supporting and making provisions for existing and planned innovation. And if we are up to date with this STI, Mr. Speaker, we can be the region's leader. We can be the region's leader. And I am inviting and encouraging certainly our ministry and the government of the Bahamas to forge policy to ensure a structured and cohesive program of science, technology, engineering, and innovation and mathematics, with a foundation being built in our education system. And I come, Mr. Speaker, right on the heels of that to the Bahamas Learning Channel. Bahamas Learning Channel. Great idea. I congratulate the former government. Great idea. Started out with a bang. Boof. And with a bang, it flopped. Boof. Good idea that must be resourced. Must be. And so the Bahamas Learning Channel, the idea was to positively impact the educational system through the usage of latest advances in media technology. During the past 5 years, however, sir, after much pomp and circumstance was given to the launch of BLC, Bahamas Learning Channel, I won't say that, BLC. Without the provisions of financial support, it has been stifled in its growth and development, and therefore its ability to reach the students of this nation. So therefore, sir, in this budget, we will invest $200,000 to provide major strides for this initiative. Now, I must say this, long-term investment is required. Long-term, we're just getting started. Long-term investment is required so that we can have the creation of a channel dedicated to the Ministry of Education with a mandate of broadcasting instructional, character building, and informational programs. The creation of programs that are based on the curriculum, that we would have 30-minute daily broadcasts of BLC programs, that we would be able, through the Bahamas Learning Channel, through our classroom lessons series, to allow the Ministry of Education to truly meet its mandate of providing distance education to students throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. 4 teachers who exemplify best practices in various disciplines will be invited to record lessons in a controlled environment with their students. Mr. Speaker, 40 plus years ago, I attended a course at the University of Oklahoma in Norman. I was a student at St. Gregory's. Because of the number of students in this particular class, I think it was history, European history. We were situated in a number of rooms while the professor was in a particular room. Some of those in the gallery may know what I'm talking about in terms of these big universities where you have a professor and the other. We were able to see the lecture on a monitor 46 years ago. And if you wanted to interact with that teacher, Mr. Speaker, on your desk 46 years ago, you could press a button. 46 years, I'm talking about technology, 46 years ago. We in the Bahamas are still at ground zero. So, Mr. Speaker, in the interest of time, sir, let me say something else. This subject called social promotion. I have long maintained, sir, as a private citizen, that this subject, this issue, this practice of social promotion is an insult to our people. It's an insult. This government recognizes that promoting students who do not meet the minimum academic standards puts them at a material and significant disadvantage by advancing them to a grade for which they are not prepared. For many students, the ultimate consequence of this, Mr. Speaker, of this disastrous practice of social promotion is that they fall so far behind that they leave school ill-equipped either for college or university, and they obviously lack the skills to join the workforce. That is why, sir, that the NDP can say that we have not only skilled students who are unemployed, but who are unemployable. Our long-term goal is to end social promotion in this Bahamian school. In order for us to do so, we must provide the additional human and financial resources and classroom facilities to accommodate the students who are unable to advance in the system. And I'm happy to say that because it brings me to the next subject, and that is private sector investment in education and training. Mr. Speaker, no matter how hard we try, no matter what we believe about ourselves, the public sector is unable to adequately provide for all of the educational needs for all of our children without private sector partnership. We must. I am happy and respectful to my brother and friend, Mr. Matt Aubrey of the Organization for Responsible Governments, who has come forth, like other private sector initiatives, with proposals as to how the private sector can partner with the government in the delivery of education in our country. We as a government must collaborate with the private sector, policymakers, parents, teachers, students, the business community, to assist in the creation of the proper infrastructure, the investment in the human resource capacity, training and retraining of our people. Investment must also adhere to a regulated framework so that we don't have, like the Member of Parliament for St. Anne's is intimating right now this morning, the situation that we now are faced and has now come across my desk involving a tertiary level institution in this country that has gone belly up, that has lost its accreditation, that has left a host of Bahamian students holding nothing, that is worthless, and owed thousands of dollars. And of course, they have come to this government seeking reparation. And again, we live in an unregulated educational environment where, unfortunately, I got to repeat what my grandmother used to say, whatever buck up. This is the 21st century Bahamas, man. Come on. We ought to be a disciplined society, governed by policies and regulations and rules and laws and standards. Not what is in your heart that beats one morning and beats one afternoon. So the ultimate goal of this partnership is to transform teaching practices and educational quality by bringing forth, I hear you, by bringing forth the resources, technology, and others into the hands of our children. Mr. Speaker, we are going to cause to become a reality the National Education Commission. And we are now vetting in our minds, our colleagues are going through a host of persons who would have been, their names would have been submitted. But so, there are some things I want to get to, and I don't want me to run out of time to get to those things. Like right now, sir, infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, I just said to you, sir, summer programs and other problems, but I just said to you, Mr. Speaker, that we don't know precisely how many buildings the Ministry of Education has. I have been advised that we have some 270. What does some 270 mean? Is it 268? Is it 277? Anyhow, we have approximately 270 Ministry of Education controlled, owned, managed buildings. 173 of these, Mr. Speaker, school premises. 50%, Mr. Speaker, in a hopeless state of disrepair. 50%. All of them, Mr. Speaker, are old, aged, and decrepit. Been around forever. Sound like the clinics. I could take a drink. You should help me out, sir. Mr. Speaker, let me use two schools as an example, a clarion classic example. Stephen Dillon, Uriah McPhee. Conceived in the mind of the former late Minister of Education, Sir Cecil Wallace. Must he travel to some country where they saw this idea, and let's keep children from being distracted by looking out the window. So let's make sure they have no windows. 100%. Perennial problems, Mr. Speaker. Day in and day out. And as a consequence of that, Mr. Speaker, students have to be let out of school far too often. Bathrooms don't work. Air conditioning doesn't work. All of these schools are well past 30 years of age. With these age buildings, Mr. Speaker, come the recurring problems, nightmare problems of maintenance issues, which of course drain human and financial resources. On a routine basis, students then have to be let out of school and they are deprived of very important classroom instructional time. Mr. Speaker, today, as I stand before this honorable House, sir, there are at least 8 schools that should be raised, never to be risen again. Right now, let me tell you, Mr. Speaker, the government, not the government high school, GHS, SC McPherson, C.W. Sawyer, R.M. Bailey, L.W. Young, Martin Town Primary School in Grand Bahama, and L.N. Coakley in Exuma. But I'm down. Beyond, I think one, the mechanic term is when they write off your car, they say something like this: beyond mechanical repair. We are just throwing money.
Good money after bad.
Good money after bad. So, right now, we need desperately, so, we need new schools in Inagua, in Gregory Town, in North Andros, North Abaco. I mean, like, Mr. Speaker, we needed these schools in about 2006, 7. So you know how desperate it is today, sir. Right now, because of what the population of our schools in the Southwest, sir, we need a primary, a comprehensive high school right now. The schools of Sadie Curtis, Galvantines, Cleveland Indians, and the rest of them, sir, are 50 to 60% overcrowded, Mr. Speaker. Overcrowded. They have 900 to 1,000 students when they're only built for 650. So you understand what challenges you have. Now, Mr. Speaker, right this minute, sir, we have approximately $120 million out into some upgrades for our school system right now. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to bring to the attention of this House of Assembly something that has become an extraordinarily sore point for the government of the Bahamas, and certainly for myself. Over the past 5 years, the previous government either invested or had planned to invest a total of $30 million, that's a 30 million dollars, in schools that we do not now own and probably never will.
I can't.
Yeah?
Explain it.
I'd be happy to explain. The government previous entered into agreement with third party in which they would invest to date, or had invested all told $30 million to build or upgrade existing buildings for the use of school on land which we don't own, schools, and which we will probably never own. It is understandable, Mr. Speaker. It is understandable, and this is for this reason. I don't know what the circumstances and what went into that decision process. I am trying to get to the bottom of it. And when I do, I will bring that to the House of Assembly. Okay? But what is the most troubling of these, Mr. Speaker, is a situation on Wolf Road in the former Bahamas Academy school property, owned by the Conference of Seventh-day Adventists. The government, if it goes through with this process, will spend 25.7 million buckaroos dollars on that problem. Listen to this, Mr. Speaker. Out of which we will get a 5-year lease. 5-year lease. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-year lease. And, Mr. Speaker, that we will be required to pay, according to the lease agreement, $60,000 per year in lease payments. So let's understand this now. Let me stretch out a bit. Break that down a bit. We invest $25.7 million to create this structure, or these structures. Once having created it so, the lease kicks in, and we pay to be in the structure we created. We built.
And don't own.
At $5,000 a month. And hold on, Mr. Speaker. This agreement was entered into approximately 3.5 years ago. It started out, Mr. Speaker, as a $1 million consideration. That consideration, Mr. Member of Parliament for East Grand Bahama, my beloved Minister of Finance, was for the replacement or the relocation or the transfer of BTVI to that school, or to that premise, to that premise. Somehow, Mr. Member for St. Anne's, Mr. Speaker, it ballooned to $8 million. That was changed, no longer BTVI relocation, that was changed. Somehow, Mr. Speaker, it got up from 8 to $25 million.
We don't know who the contractor is.
We're not, well, I can tell you, well, what we know, Mr. Speaker, is, what we know, sir, is monies have already been expended. There was much discussion. I cannot find the agreement, lease agreement. I am still searching for it. It's coming. I'm sure it's coming. It's coming. The point person was a person in my ministry and the former Minister of Education. I'm not blaming anybody, Mr. Speaker. What I'm saying, sir, is this. We are in a circumstance at the moment now which the Bahamian, see, here's what we come to the House for. And here's what we must affirm to the Bahamian people. Not the Free National Movement as government, not the Progressive Liberal Party as government, that the government of the Bahamas must ensure that the Bahamian people, in the expenditure of its hard-earned resources, is getting value.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Member,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
you have a point of order?
The members yielded, Mr. Speaker.
No. Do you have a point of order?
The rules indicate that if the member yields, this is standard. This is not new.
I just learning.
Honorable Member. Honorable Member. Are you on a point of order or point of privilege?
I told the member
What is your point of order?
The point of order, Mr. Speaker, is that the member is suggesting to this House or intimating.
Which rule
Speaker,
is being breached?
The rule that's being breached is that the member, I don't think it's purposeful because he's indicating, I was trying to be helpful actually, because he's indicating he cannot find the records in his ministry. And these issues are usually found in the Ministry of Finance, public-private partnerships. And so I was wondering, what I really was wondering is if the member would make the inquiry and kindly lay it on the table of the Parliament so we could see what the arrangement is. I'm sure it's documented somewhere. The impression is being given that the Bahamas government, it's because I am asking that the member lay on this table of the Parliament what he is indicating is as much as he knows and is documented for the arrangement that he's speaking about, Mr. Speaker. Thank you,
Yes,
Mr. Speaker.
thank you.
I'm asking for the member to lay that on the table of Parliament for the benefit of members of this House, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I reiterate a point I made before. The point is this, Mr. Speaker. It is my respectful submission that the government of the Bahamas must, at all times, ensure that the Bahamian people, let me say it this way, this government will ensure that the Bahamian people gets value for money. Mr. Speaker, with your permission, sir, I am almost out of time. Let me say quickly about BTVI. You know, we are very committed to technical and vocational education, sir. I want to say to you, sir, that, yeah, but that ain't enough. I want to say to you, sir, that technical and vocational education, sir, is a committed, a solid commitment of this. However, BTVI is the primary vehicle through which VOTEC, I'll use that term, VOTEC education is to be delivered. All right, sir? Mr. Speaker, if you have ever gone to, if you in recent time have gone to BTVI, sir, you will cry. It needs, that too needs to be condemned and start over. We have a smart building that is going up, sir, that is 5 months overdue as a result of dispute between the contractor and the architect and so on. That, sir, will be addressed with dispatch, and that will be resolved, sir, before you have time to rise and sit back down, Mr. Speaker. That issue is going to be addressed. The Bahamian people will get value for money. I have to move on, Mr. Speaker. You know about the University of the Bahamas, sir. That university came into being in 2016, came into force on the 10th of November. That university now is moving into a fully autonomous institution, a mission to advance and expand access to higher education, promote academic freedom, drive national development, build character through teaching, learning, research, scholarship, and service. And Mr. Speaker, it is, again, in time, the intention of this government that all Bahamians who qualify will go to the University of the Bahamas free tuition in time. That is a commitment of this government. I need to get to scholarships, sir. And I want to say to you, sir, Mr. Speaker, in brief, that we have challenges with the scholarship scenario in this country. I'll focus on 4 real serious issues of scholarships at this time. Plenty scholarship problems, Mr. Speaker. 1, there are too few applications from the public schools and the schools in the Family Island. Public schools, schools in the Family Island. Number 2, sir, there is a pervasive undesirability of those who apply for scholarships to want to go to the University of the Bahamas. Number 3, there is a recurring, sharp increase in the number of persons seeking scholarship for universities abroad. Number 4, sir, it's a significant increase over the years in the number of Bahamians who are opting not to return home, even though they are the beneficiaries of our scholarship, Bahamian tax money. I remember, Mr. Speaker, when I left to go to college, I think there was an agreement I had to sign that if I took the Bahamian people's money, I had to return home and spend those years that I went away, or, Mr. Speaker, you had the option, a member for Fort Charlotte, pay back the people's money. Okay? Mr. Speaker, by the time you rise and sit down, this issue will be addressed. That will be resolved. If you're going to take our money, you are going to provide an investment return on that money. Let me come to this educational loan scholarship arrangement, Mr. Speaker. You know the Education Loan Authority, Mr. Speaker? You know it? Yes, sir. It has been now basically, it is now just basically been a collection agency. Collection. And I want to bring something to the attention of our people. Today, Mr. Speaker, since it was first started in 2001, there have been 4,700 student loans that were issued in 26 disciplines. Today, sir, the default rate is 75%. Default. What does that mean? People don't pay back. Now, I don't know if we have a, it might be, St. Barnabas, that we didn't sell it properly. Our people, some of our people, let me apologize, some of our people have this belief that because it's government's money, I don't have to pay it back. You see this down at the Mortgage Corporation, Department of Housing. Because it's government money, I don't have to pay it back. So it might be a problem that we have with the narrative, with the presentation. We don't emphasize loan that has a corresponding obligation called repayment. 75 default 75% default rate. Here's what that means, Mr. Speaker. As you and I now speak, at 11:45 this morning, sir, we are owed 156 million buckaroo.
That's my deficit.
156 million. Now, that goes back to when it was established in 2001, then the Bank of the Bahamas dropped out of it, and in August of 2009, due to extremely high defaulted rate, the scheme was discontinued, so it goes back to 2003. Yeah, no, not a problem, not bad. I understand. Frank and full disclosure. No, we ain't blaming nobody. We just saying. Now, Mr. Speaker, we just speak. Now, Mr. Speaker, I know the reluctance that governments have had in going after students who have failed to pay the loans back. I understand that. Mr. Speaker, may I speak to the Bahamian people through this House of Assembly? If you owe the government money,
Make an arrangement.
come and pay us.
Make an arrangement.
We'd be happy to accommodate whatever schemes, designs you want. If you don't, and we got to come and get you, grief is your fate. I leave that right there, Mr. Speaker, because we cannot afford to be out of pocket $150+ million. Can't happen. We have a shortfall in the scholarship program in our ministry. We have a shortfall in the capital budget program in our ministry. We have a shortfall all around, which could easily be made up if people were to come and pay what they owe. I think there's a song to that extent by Pay Me What You Owe. Okay. Mr. Speaker, by the way, labor relations, because we want to ensure that there's harmonious labor relations in the community of Ministry of Education and so on, sir, we have caused to be in our ministry 2 labor relations officers, one for BUT, sir, and one for the Bahamas Education Managers Union, sir. I can say to you at the moment, sir, I can say to you right now at the moment, sir, we have a problem in meeting the outstanding obligations of those teachers, which really causes me some grief and distress. They are owed over $3.5 million. Some of them, Mr. Speaker, going back years, monies that they are owed. I say to those teachers, hard-working, dedicated, we will pay you the money we owe you. Now, Mr. Speaker, human resources. Mr. Garden Hills, don't do me like that. Say, oh Lord, as if we go to a funeral. It's going to sound like that. Mr. Speaker, you know, the Ministry of Education has a budget of over $280 million. 66% of which goes to personal emoluments. That doesn't include rent, this, that, and so on. You see, Mr. Speaker, we don't have really much to work with after we take care of these very important responsibilities. We have at the ministry over 6,000 employees, one of the largest ministries in government. We have approximately 4,500 teachers. So it's a large ministry. Since 2013, Mr. Speaker, ministry has had added to its payrolls some 985 contract workers. How much? 985 contract workers. Okay. There's a need in any organization to have what you might call contract workers. No problem. 311 of those contract workers, Mr. Speaker, were hired between December 2016, May 2017. 311 of them, sir, were hired. Okay. Now, so, here's what is disturbing about this, Mr. Speaker. Here's what is disturbing. It's a process that we have got to clean up because it's not fair to these people. You know, again, you see me jumping mid-sentence, but that's okay. I hear people from time to time talk about victimization. You've heard this, Mr. Speaker, victimization. These are the people who are being victimized. Yes. These are the people who are being victimized. Let me tell you why, Mr. Speaker. When you are hired by, and again, I go back to narrative. You remember, Mr. St. Barnabas? I go back to narrative. How were these people hired? Here's what the process is supposed to be, sir. There's a process to get into the public service. A process, sir, which was contaminated, bastardized, and aborted in at least the Ministry of Education. Well, I understand it may happen often, but the point is the Bahamian people are tired of it. And it's unfair to those people. And you see, the problem, Mr. Speaker, is at the end of this month, in exactly...
That's me.
At the end of this month, Mr. Speaker, in exactly 15 days, many of these contracts come to an end. Now, those people don't know that, or many of them don't know that. They think they are working for the government.
Well, they were promised they were working for the government.
What does this government do? What does this government do? Now, you know, the member for Marathon knows about contracts. We are lawyers. When the contract comes to an end, the contract comes to an end. But that's not what they expect, Mr. Speaker. In fact, they have a legitimate expectation because they were sold something different. Again, if you need a person for a particular period of time, fine, you discuss that. You say this is what the period of time is. Hey, I need you for a year. You and I may extend this, may renew it. That's not what they understand, Mr. Speaker. I met with this daily. They expect to be on the government's payroll till they get 65 or 60 or whatever the case is. And they want to know why they are not made pension and permanent, or whatever you call it, permanent and pensionable. PNP. That's good. I trying to save my words. PNP. Mr. Speaker. And I can remember, as a media person, listening to the former Prime Minister in this House, speaking about these contracts or contracts entered into by a government leading up to a general election. You know, I come out of Rotary. And we'll ensure we'll not do it by legislation. I come out of Rotary, Mr. Speaker. Some of you may be familiar with Rotary. You are not permitted to tie the hands of a succeeding administration without the concurrence of that administration. Now, I know that government is continuous, okay? But we cannot, Mr. Speaker, continue the practice of entering into these long-term 4, 5, 6-year contracts, in particular personal contracts, with people. Let me come to that in a minute. Let me finish this. Let me finish this, Mr. Speaker. So we have now a situation where at least 311 of these contractual workers, many of whom are going to come up for at the end of June. General service workers, janitors, security assistants, all minimum wage. Whether you got a BA degree or not, mind you, it's minimum wage. What do you do? And God help us if we let them go or we don't redo that contract, then we, quote, victimized. But who is victimizing them? Whoever hired them, whatever the promise was, that gave them the impression. Speaker, in addition to that, sir, we have a number of other contractual workers, not at minimum wage, way over 40, 50, 60, 70, $100,000, sir, entered into contracts, sir, that go way into this administration's term, sir. And the thing that pains me about that particular contract, in some instances, Mr. Speaker, is that some of these contracts, in terms of the amount, are for amounts in which the individual recipient is making far in excess of what they would have made and what they did make while they were substantively employed in the ministry.
May 2nd, no cancellation clause. No cancellation. 3 years.
So you now, Mr. Speaker, again, if you dare find any reason to terminate these contracts, determine these contracts. But here we are. Here we are. We are victimizing, Mr. Speaker. Okay? It's not fair. See, I understand. I don't understand, but for the sake of rhetoric, I understand. But what is unfair is to these people. This is where it is unfair. These are the people who are being victimized. They're not properly trained. They're not properly vetted. They don't go through the process. They're not determined if they are needed. There are no identified vacancies that they fill. They're entering into various departments for which that the department isn't ready to receive them, for which there are no job responsibilities for them. So they're languishing somewhere in the system. We got them on our payroll. The public service doesn't have it on their payroll. Country, man. This is a country.
$500 million now.
Anyhow, Mr. Speaker.
Every ministry had this thing happen. Every ministry. Every ministry.
You know, one of the themes
Yours didn't have it?
not one of the themes, my theme in South Beach is this is a new day. Jesus said to his disciples, you know, there are those who want to be leaders and they lord over you. Then he used this term as recorded in Luke's gospel. But it shall not be that way with you. Let me make it personal to this government. It shall not be that way with us. We are going, we want to be open and transparent and honest and accountable to the Bahamian people. We are telling you now, there's a process. There's a process. That process will be observed, will be respected, it will be adhered to, in all full recognition of the human value that you and I have for each other and respect that we have for each other. We are not going to fool you, bamboozle you, and make you believe that there's something for nothing. Because we cannot afford to continue to degrade the dignitary value of our people by telling them something that is not true, that we know is not true. I want to say once again how committed and privileged I am, Mr. Speaker, to the wonderful people of South Beach, my own family, my wife and my sister who sits in the gallery. I want to say that we are committed to ensuring that South Beach remains one of the premier constituencies. All of our constituencies are beautiful, but you know. I want to ensure my beloved South Beach electors that unlike the previous representation they had, where there seems to have been an absent representative who had the Bahamian disease of taking people for granted, shall not be that way with me, Mr. Speaker. To all things, then, and to the great glory of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, we give God praise. Amen.
Amen.
Honorable member,
The member,
just a moment, please. I'm trying to recognize you. The chair recognizes the honorable member Fine Lister.
thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate it. I'll try and take my time and wait and do it right, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, the member for South Beach referred to contracts entered into by the government for infrastructural development and leases. And I'm now asking that he lay on the table of this Parliament the references to those documents. And once he's referred to it in his speech, he ought to lay it in this Parliament, Mr. Speaker. The member is saying in due time. It's accountability, Mr. Speaker, in due time. Yes, I am asking that as the member for Elizabeth did with his speech, and can I say that he also provided me, as he indicated he would, the document from the WHO this morning. He referred to it in his speech. So I'm asking the member who referred to these arrangements in his speech to lay them on the table of the Parliament for the Bahamian people to scrutinize. Is that a problem, Mr. Speaker? I don't think so.
I don't think that it is.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
As many? The chair recognizes the honorable member for Fort Charlotte.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, all I can say this morning is my Lord. To God be the glory, great things he has done. And I just ask that the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart this morning be acceptable in his sight. Mr. Speaker, I remember in early December of 2005, standing by the track at the University of Puerto Rico, talking to one of my young athletes. See, Mr. Speaker, I had already spent about 4 years, the last 4 years or so of my life, completing my advanced studies and coaching at the university, and was trying to make a decision as to what would be the next steps in my life. I was getting older, Mr. Speaker, and I was trying to make a decision as to whether or not I would stay in Puerto Rico and possibly teach at the university, return to the life I left behind in Georgia, move to Florida, or start all over again in the Bahamas. At the time, Mr. Speaker, I was also working long distance with 2 young Bahamian athletes, Aaron Clare and Derek Atkins, trying to help them fulfill their dreams of becoming championship track athletes. These 2 young men wanted me to return to Georgia to coach them for the upcoming Olympic Games. And I wanted to do it as well, Mr. Speaker. But I remember telling the young Puerto Rican athlete that afternoon that I felt as if whatever God had for me next, it was back in the Bahamas. This was 2005. You see, Mr. Speaker, I could feel it, and I thought I could see it. So without hesitation, I made my way back, supposedly back to the Bahamas, supposedly to be a consultant in the special education department at the Ministry of Education. I was excited to get to work in the system, Mr. Speaker, hoping to use my gifts and talents and life experiences to help solve some of our country's delinquency problems. I already had the job, you know, Mr. Speaker, and so I was excited. I interviewed, went through the process. But while I was waiting to officially start, Mr. Speaker, I found out that someone high up lost my files. Yes, lost. I didn't want to call any names. The name was called in here yesterday, and I am trying not to, but I'll just say somebody high up lost my files. So they wanted me to bring all of my documents in all over again, Mr. Speaker. Politics, you know. But I wasn't feeling that, Mr. Speaker, because like I told the person who wanted me to bring my documents in, I didn't come home to play politics. I just wanted to work. You see, at this time, the life I saw for myself back here in the Bahamas just seemed to evaporate, Mr. Speaker, as I had no job, and I was starting from the bottom. But you know, Mr. Speaker, despite all of the personal trials that I had to endure over the last 11 years here, I never once regretted coming back home, because I truly believed that whatever God had for me next was here. And even though for most of the time that I was here, I felt like I was just existing, I was determined to trust God. My being here today, in this sacred place, the place where individuals like Sir Lyndon, Sir Milo Butler, Hubert Ingram, Arthur Hanna, and the list goes on, place where these men stood, and women, Janet Boswick, the place where they stood. With me being here today, Mr. Speaker, that is a testament to the fact that whether we want to believe it or not, God always knows the end before the story begins. Once you can hear him, all you have to do is trust him, and he'll bring you from there to here. As such, Mr. Speaker, it is with a grateful heart that I stand here today on behalf of the great people of Fort Charlotte to address you, my parliamentary colleagues, and the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, I can't find the words to describe how privileged I feel and how privileged I am to be in these hallowed halls as the people's representative. If I had not done it sufficiently, let me take this time once again to express my gratitude to the residents of Fort Charlotte who voted to send me here. I wish to say thank you. For those who did not vote for me, or who did not vote at all, I thank you too. Believe it or not, because believe it or not, you too are a source of inspiration for me to do well over the next 5 years. And even though there are no guarantees, I hope that my work in and on behalf of Fort Charlotte over the next 5 years, God willing, will be excellent enough to win your trust. I wish to thank Dr. Hubert Alexander Minnis and the Free National Movement for affording me this opportunity to serve. If it were not for their confidence in me, I would not be here today to address this honorable house. I also wish to thank and give special recognition to the following people. My grandparents, Audley and Lillian Humes. Audley Humes, as some may know, was a giant of a man in the Bahamian society. And Mr. Speaker, I find it somewhat ironic that almost 40 years to the date, My grandfather, Audley Humes, also ran to be the member of Parliament for Fort Charlotte. He didn't make it here. But I'm glad that he instilled in me the things that were necessary for me to carry on his legacy and be here. My grandmother Lillian, who I hope is watching today from bed, because I know if she were able, she would be here today. 102. Yes, sir. 102. And she was no less of a giant of a woman. Still is. Always fighting me every time I go to try feed her. Beating me up. But I love this lady. I remember many days when my grandfather didn't want to walk me over the hill to S.C. McPherson or drive us over the hill to S.C. McPherson. She would put on them high-heel shoes, and from Chippingham, we would walk from Chippingham, Blue Hill Road, over the hill to S.C. McPherson just so that she could watch me in a play. And I'm glad that God spared her life to see her hard work pay off. To my mother and belated father, Marcia Young and Alfred St. George Clare, from Mr. Clare, from Turks Island and Inagua. Yes, ma'am. Madam, my God. See, again, these two individuals, I thank my mother for the hard work that she put in very early with me to start me on this course. Yeah, and Mr. Speaker, you know, I thought my mother was living in the United States until the campaign started and my grandson came home one day and said, you know, your mommy around by mama. I said, well, what's she doing here? Unbeknownst to me, she came back just so that she could work with me in the campaign. And she never returned. She's still here. And I'm going to keep her here because now is my time to pay her back for her hard work. My father, Alfred Clare, you know, we didn't have a great relationship growing up, but you know, many days I spent on his glass-bottom boat right here, Prince George Dock. Growing up, he never bought me the things that I wanted. If I wanted a pair of shoes, I had to go out on the boat and work the boat. If I wanted some books, I had to get out on the boat and work the boat, clean the glass, show the tourists the fish, and do all the things, tie the rope, if I wanted some money. Back then, I didn't understand it. I didn't like that too much. Yeah, but I appreciate it greatly because he taught me the value of working for what you want and not expecting to get what you think you want. So I thank my father. I wish he was here today. I remember when I first went to Cal State University to start my studies. I'd come home and he'd tell all his friends, oh, you know, my son is at the University of California. You know, he was so proud. And I couldn't tell him that it wasn't the University of California, it was Cal State. So I just let him carry on. My sisters and brothers, both here and abroad, my sister Dee Dee, Bianca, Belinda, and my most hardworking sister Patrice, who I'm sure is watching today, my brothers Darrell Clare, Dion Clare, and Damon Clare. To my son, Denrado, and grandson, Mackay, my aunt Selena, Christine, June, Pat, Mady, Uncle Simeon, Stephen, and Kelton, and my many family members on the Humes, on both the Humes and Clare side, and particularly my cousin, Father Mage Romel Humes. I wish to give them thank you and pay special recognition for all that they've done for me throughout life. With that, Mr. Speaker, let me also thank my hard-working campaign team for their hard work and dedication in bringing Fort Charlotte back to the free national movement from the fold after a little hiatus. This victory and honor is as much theirs as it is mine. And whereas there were many whose hard work and dedication paved the way for me to be here, I would like to give a special thank to some of you said that you had the best team. But that's fine, because I had Gideon's Army. Yes? So I'd like to give a special thank you to my Gideon's Army. Yes? My Gideon's Army street team in particular, Charlene St. Roe. She was at my side, I remember, in 2012 when I was running for the other people. No, let me see. That's my party, too. Before I came home, yes, sir. Now, don't forget now, let me give you a little history, because my grandfather also started his career running for a Green Party as well. Yeah, before he came home. Yes, sir. Back in 2012, I remember Charlene St. Roe. We can come get him. We can come get him. Charlene St. Roe has a special place in my heart because back in 2012, she was on the other side. And, you know, she would give me that scowling face quite a bit because, you know, I was trying to get a spot in Fort Charlotte. But, you know, no matter what, she was a beautiful lady. And as God would have it, years later, she was now, and I was now, on the same team. And so one of the things I learned from that is you always have to be careful. Life comes full circle. So Charlene St. Roe, my mother again, Marsha Young, my Aunt Carolyn, Anton Butler, Patrice Johnson, Brother Winston Davis, Braxton Bowes, Stuart Howell, Mr. Craig Hepburn, Mr. Rudolph Pettigan, Pamela Miller, my campaign manager, Julius Cox, and my wonderful office angels, Kevin Neversole, Leela Woods, and Elizabeth Williams. This team of individuals, Mr. Speaker, were relentless from start to finish, particularly at the finish. To those who donated to our campaign, I say thank you. To my pastor, Reverend Hugh Roll, and the members of the Salem Union Baptist Church, my colleagues at the University of the Bahamas, and the many prayer warriors from the community and beyond, all I can say is that the effectual, fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much. God has heard your prayers, and he's answered your cry. Now, I saved this one for last. This individual, Mr. Speaker, is a special lady. This is a one-woman campaign team. She don't need no help. And I remember, I think she returned home as well to make sure I was elected. And she sits here today in this gallery. I would like to give special recognition to my Aunt Jane Fernando. Sits right there in the back of the gallery. My other Fort Charlotte mother. No prospective voter was off limits to her, and probably half of the PLPs that voted for me was as a result of her walking and talking. So, and Jane, thank you so very much for all you've done. And boy, let me tell you, you talk about could bring in money. She ain't had no shame.
I need her.
So, Jane, thank you so very much. Now, Mr. Speaker, I would like to begin my contribution by saying that my first official function as a member of Parliament was to bring remarks at the homegoing service of Mr. Trevor Thompson, resident of Fort Charlotte. Mr. Thompson is the son of Dolores Red Archer, from the iconic Archer family on Providence Avenue. This young man was murdered right in front of his home on Providence Avenue on May 6th. Now, the Archer family, Keith Archer, Paula Archer, Beverly, and Brenda, sort of raised me, and I watched Trevor grow up. So you can imagine how sad it was for me to have my first official duty as a member of Parliament be to bring remarks at his funeral. Yes? But this is what I recognize, Mr. Speaker. Trevor's death happened, we mourned him, and we moved on because violent death in our society has seemed to become the norm. Death, crime, and criminality has become big business in the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker. The number of undertakers have increased because there is lucrative business in mining the dead. Security firms have increased because there is lucrative business in protecting person, home, and property from the growing criminal element in the Bahamian society. As a result of the growing crime problem, our system, and I hope I'm not stepping on any toes when I say this today, but our system is so bloated with lawyers and people wanting to be lawyers because lawyering has become, or has always been, and is becoming an even bigger business. Check Bank Lane every morning and afternoon, and you'll see why I say this. Cases get put off or prolonged for further review, or because either the defense or the prosecution didn't come prepared, and lawyers make money. And the clients end up broke and begging, trying to support the lawyer's habit. Big business, and again, I don't mean to step on anybody's foot in here today, but it's big business, death, crime, and criminality, Mr. Speaker.
That's why you need to talk. Point of order from the chair.
In our attempt to cut down on crime and criminality, Mr. Speaker, we spend an exorbitant amount of money bolstering our police forces with new hires, new cars, firearms, and all other kinds of military gear, to the extent that the former Progressive Liberal Party felt the need to take $1.2 million from the Chinese for armored vehicles, automatic anti-riot grenade launchers, smoke tear gas grenades, anti-riot gear, and other stuff. For what reason, Mr. Speaker? Have we gotten that bad? Yeah. It would appear that the more officers we hired, the more crime and criminal activity increased. The more cars we bought and put on the streets, the more the murder rate went up. We go to war on crime, and crime goes to war on us. And we just continue existing in this vicious cycle. Mr. Speaker, this is my only observation, but it would appear that the continued increases in the military forces in our country, in a country as small as ours, at the rate as ours, is a sure sign that we are not losing control of our society, but that we have lost control. Where we are today, Mr. Speaker, is best captured by the words of Dr. Martin Luther King in his letter from a Birmingham jail. And I'm going to change it up a bit, though, Mr. Speaker, to make it more applicable to our society. He says, we stand in the middle of two opposing forces in our Bahamian community. One is a force of complacency made up of Bahamian people who, as a result of long years of oppression, have been so completely drained of self-respect and a sense of somebodyness that they have just adjusted to segregation, separation, and marginalization. And two, the other force a few Bahamians in the middle class and upper class who, because of a degree of academic and economic security, and because at points in points they profit by segregation, have become unconsciously insensitive to the problems of the masses. The other force is a force of bitterness and hatred that comes perilously close to advocating violence, and in too many instances leading to violence and violent deaths. In a society supposedly built on Christian principles, Mr. Speaker, it appears as if all we want to do to each other is find the next method to penalize, be punitive towards, or cannibalize one another, and in particular, those who are less fortunate than we are, primarily for our own profits. All I say, Mr. Speaker, is that death, crime, and criminality has become big business, perhaps to the detriment of us solving this one problem. The solution, I feel, Mr. Member from South Beach, to this death, crime, and criminality is buried somewhere in our willingness to slowly put these industries that I spoke about earlier to rest in favor of creating newer industries that do not profit off of the faults and pains of our people, but instead profit off our people's gifts and talents so as to enlarge our territory, like the songwriter says. Additionally, it's buried in the midst of our understanding of and willingness to not only hear and say, but heed and do something about the old adage, idle hands are the devil's playground. We say this so much, sir, that we don't even pay attention to it anymore. And our government, this Free National Movement government, has proposed a great deal of initiatives to bring relief to the Bahamian people. It is my hope that with the funds that we are borrowing, Mr. Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, that we make idle hands and minds a priority of our spending. Idle hands are the devil's playground. Pay your bills, but live in the condition that we live in. Idle hands are the devil's playground. A bit later in this presentation, Mr. Speaker, I'll tell this honorable House some of the plans that we have in store for the residents of Fort Charlotte that will assist our government's effort to rid our country of this scourge of death, crime, and criminality, and to occupy idle hands. But until then, Mr. Speaker, I beg your pardon to share a few other observations. For the most part, Mr. Speaker, Fort Charlotte, the community where I was born, raised, and still live, is a quiet, peaceful community with a diverse makeup of people. Extending from Prospect Ridge in the west, John F. Kennedy Drive and Farrington Road in the south, Nassau Street in the east, and Bay Street in the north, Fort Charlotte, when I was growing up, used to be a picturesque tourism center on the island of New Providence. There, in addition to flocking to the historic fort on the top of the hill, tourists would come in droves to visit the seafloor aquarium and the industrial gardens, or ride in horse-drawn carriages and taxi cabs, admiring the homes and gardens in the neighborhood. There was a certain pride associated with being from Fort Charlotte, and I believe Fort Charlotte was probably one of the first middle, upper-class communities on the island. Over the years, however, I watched as our community slowly lost its luster and life as a result of just bare minimum representation. Almost everywhere you look in the community, residents are barely making it. I mean, even though I was a professor at the College of the Bahamas, I wasn't immune to the just barely making it syndrome. Yeah? But even in my struggles, my heart would always go out to those people in my community and the surrounding areas, because if I were having a hard time making it, I would only try to imagine what it was like for them. Before I became a part of this government, when I was just that regular Bahamian, like most, hustling to keep my head above water in this somewhat chaotic society, I would look at the chaos around me, all the death, all the criminal activity, all the other elements associated with this vexing issue, all the way we treated our elderly citizens, the high level of poverty that led so many to get involved in criminal activity. And I will repeat this again, the way we treated our elderly citizens who slave away their lives from sunup to sunset to make this country run, to only be left out in the cold, both literally and figuratively, begging and borrowing without dignity in their old age. I would always wonder why it had to be this way. Yeah? Why do we have to live like this? As a resident of Fort Charlotte, I would look at my people in their movements through the community, whether it was in Pitt Road, Rock Crusher, Chipping Arm, Farndon Road, Sarah Robinson, or even in the West Grove, and I would recognize that all they wanted, like every other Bahamian, was to live a decent life. They wanted to work for themselves or have a decent job so that they could pay their own way in society, so that they could pay their electricity bills, they could pay their cable bills, water bill, grocery bill, give their children a proper education, fix their roofs if they got damaged, and just live comfortably. To have enough money to put in their pockets, to go to Bamboo Shack, a gallery of cinemas, or to Outback if they wanted to, take a little trip to the islands to visit some family, or to go to Orlando to do some shopping, or get off from work early to go pick up their children, or just stop on the corner to get a little drink for a while before they go home. That's all they wanted. They didn't want much, Mr. Speaker. They just want to go home to peace and quiet, and even if they have 1 or 10 children, they wanted to know that they could pay their own way and live and die decently in this society. They didn't want much. Good lighting on their streets and timely garbage collection in the government subdivisions that we put them in. And even though it was rough on them, Fort Charlotte people, like most, pay or try to pay their taxes as the law prescribes. And at the same time, they elect governments to manage those taxes wisely so that they can live that simple little Bahamian lifestyle. They could care less whether we borrowed on the money, invest with the money, or build with it. They just wanted their elected officials to use their money with sense and make it affordable for them to live. They didn't want much, Mr. Speaker. But one of the problems the people told me that they have, Mr. Speaker, is to see their hard-earned dollars leave their pockets and paychecks to be pissed away. Quote unquote, pissed away. Oh, well, I was only using the words of our former Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker. Wasted away. Let me withdraw that word, Mr. Speaker, and say wasted away, squandered away, split it away. Yes, but I was only using the words of our. Wasted away by their government, who then turn around again to tax them harder and borrow more, putting more burdens on their back. For them, Mr. Speaker, the last 5 years under the past PLP administration was particularly reprehensible. $20 million in police time money, gone. Overtime money, gone. $1.9 million that the government borrowed between 2012 and 13, Mr. Speaker, gone. $30 million in back taxes from the numbers houses, gone. $48 million from road traffic, Mr. Speaker, gone. 10 from...
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Angleton.
Speaker, point of order is that this member is misrepresenting the truth. And that's a very serious assertion for a fellow member. First of all, Speaker, public taxes are not gone. They go somewhere. And so to give the impression that they're gone is not correct. And it's just rhetoric. The second point that is more fundamental for me, though, Mr. Speaker, as former Minister of Transport, I call on this member, and I'm glad he's given me the opportunity because I said I was waiting for it. I call on this member to lay on the table of this House evidence that $48 million went missing from the Road Traffic Department, Speaker. Otherwise, he should withdraw it, Mr. Speaker, and it should be struck from the record, Mr. Speaker. This is not the rally, Mr. Speaker. This is the House Assembly. And there's two sides to the story. So I ask this member, Mr. Speaker, either substantiate that allegation, because I served as minister, that $48 million went missing from the public treasury or from road traffic, or withdraw it, and I ask it to be expunged from the record, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, in the interest of time, what I will try to do is see what we can do to locate the Auditor General's report so we can lay that on the table of the House. But let me rephrase my words then, Mr. Speaker, in the interest of time. We'll lay it again. Let me rephrase my word. Unaccounted, still unaccounted for.
What is the point of order?
I'm asking the member to either substantiate or withdraw. It's a simple matter, Speaker. And if the Auditor General's report is right in this Parliament, he ain't got to wait long. He could, during the lunch break, he could find it. And I want him to find an Auditor General's report which says $48 million went missing from the Road Traffic Department. But until then, Mr. Speaker, he ought to withdraw it, and I'm asking to be expunged from the record.
Honorable member, if I recall, the honorable member for Angleston, in your presentation, you raised the issue of the $48 million allegedly going missing from your ministry. And at that time, I thought we were satisfied with the explanation that you gave at that time.
Remember, see, this is not the rally, man. Bahamians finished with rally, Mr. Speaker. Bahamians are finished with the rally. They want governance now, and I'm asking the member, Mr. Speaker, to either substantiate or withdraw. It's a simple thing. You don't come here and make wild rally talk. You're not in the rally pulpit, man. You're in the Parliament of the people. It's the people's time. It's the people's Parliament. It's the people's Parliament, Speaker. I agree, it's people's time, Speaker. So I'm asking now, Mr. the member, withdraw, and I'm asking that it be substantiate or withdraw, and it should be struck from the record, Speaker.
The position of the chair is this. There is...
You speaking to me, Speaker? I'm sure I'll be on my feet.
Pardon? Yes. It is my understanding from a letter that I received from the Auditor General that a number of assessments are being made and that he will deliver those reports to me for me to lay on the table of the House of Assembly. And one of those areas is Road Traffic Department. So when that occurs, hopefully that will lay all these allegations to rest.
I think so, Mr. Speaker. And I agree with that, Mr. Speaker, and I think that's very reasonable. But I'm asking the member now to either substantiate or withdraw. And if he cannot substantiate, and changing the language is not going to help, Mr. Speaker, if it's not accurate. There's no unaccounted for. There's no unaccounted. The report is there, and these members know better, Mr. Speaker. They went through an entire rally, an election process, perpetuating misinformation. So what I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, we're now in the Parliament. This is not the rally. And I'm asking the member to either substantiate or withdraw, Speaker. It's a simple thing. It's just normal. You can't substantiate, withdraw.
Member for Charlotte?
In the interest of time, and until I can once again bring this to the House to appease the member from Angleston, I will withdraw those statements and move on. I hope that I will not cause her any grievance further.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm getting old.
But here's the thing, Mr. Speaker. They built no new schools all during their term in office. And they had the nerve to spend millions of dollars on a vulgar street festival that feeds the further objectification of our young women and delinquency of our young people in general. I could say, because I remember the first year coming home from a track practice at the sports center, taking one of my athletes home and seeing kids along with their parents sitting on the sideline across the street from where these half-naked women and half-naked men were sitting. And I'm saying to myself, my Lord, is this what we want our children to now look at? And God forbid, when they grow up, want to be like or be even worse than. And so to know that our government put this thing on us, I say shame. For the most part, it would seem like the last 5 years, Mr. Speaker, was a total waste of time. But then again, I guess when you look at the results of the general election of May 10th, one could only say to God be the glory, great things he has done. The band of wasteful Egyptians that we saw yesterday under the leadership of King Perry, we shall see no more. Yes? Now, Mr. Speaker, once again, the Free National Movement has been charged with cleaning up the mess, their mess, but just like they did in 1992 and in 2007, we did it before, so we can do it again. And it is my hope, Mr. Speaker, that the ranting and raving and questioning coming from the remaining four to my right would turn to humility and great...
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. Point of order.
The chair recognizes the member from Angleston.
I know the member is new, and so I give leeway for that, Mr. Speaker. But the first thing you do in here, Mr. Speaker, you treat other members with respect. You don't come in here and say that when a member speaks on behalf of the people of this country who elected them, that they are ranting and raving, Speaker. It's a disgrace, and I'm asking this member to manage his dialogue. He's an educator, man. Manage your dialogue, that one that perpetuates respect in this house. And I ask that what he said about the contributions of the 4 members in this parliament, only 4 of us, might be more next time. Who knows, Mr. Speaker? That's how it is. Our history has shown, Mr. Speaker. See, this is where I've seen the intoxication before, and I got to be careful of that, Speaker. In politics, today it's out every 5 years since 1997, we've been changing governments, 5-year chunks. So no one should get excited. Let's do the best we can while we're here and hope we're re-elected. But I'm asking that the member withdraw how he described the contribution of the members on this side who are represented by the Bahamian people, and that be struck from the record, Mr. Speaker. It's a disgrace.
Honorable member from Fort Charlotte.
I want to talk.
Yes, sir, Mr. It is my hope, Mr. Speaker, that the firm objections being put forward by the remaining 4 to my right would turn to humility and gratefulness for God having spared them from the people's wrath.
The chair recognizes the honorable member from Angleston.
Speaker, let me just say to the Speaker, I want to be careful how I describe the dialogue of the member of Fort Charlotte, who is a first-time member in this House, and it's the grace of God that has him here. Grace of God does not single out or in favor or otherwise to 1 or 2 people. The grace of God attaches to all of us. The grace of God has him here. The grace of God has us all here also. And I would urge the member, Mr. Speaker, that he attach to his dialogue and his presentation a level of humility, because it's not being exhibited right now. He's speaking about humility on our side, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I call on this member. Yes, I can tell him. He's telling me. Speaker, listen, Mr. Speaker, I want everyone here to understand, they can talk all they want, but I'm going to say what I am going to say. So I don't want no one to believe they can talk down this member of Parliament. So, Mr. Speaker, I am objecting to the language that this member, it is demeaning, it's insulting, it is personal. The rules don't allow it. And I can find for you, Mr. Speaker, it's insulting. It's insulting. We do not have to insult each other in this house, Mr. Speaker. The grace of God has Fort Charlotte right here, nothing else. So I don't want him, Speaker, insulting members of this house, Speaker. And I ask that he withdraw it or manage his language in a way that's respectful to to other members of the House, Mr. Speaker.
Before you said, honorable member, what specifically, in the recent comments,
He
what
said
specifically
that-
would you like the honorable member to
said
withdraw?
That we should be humble and grateful because we have, it's the grace of God that spared us from some rather, Mr. Speaker, well, but Mr. Speaker, it is demeaning language of fellow members, Mr. Speaker. It is demeaning. It's demeaning. It's demeaning of the Bahamian people, Mr. Speaker. The Bahamian people elected us, and that's why we're here. We don't have to be anything except respectful to the chair and to each other. That's the only thing we got to be. We ain't got to be grateful for anything he says, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, the point I'm making is that the language is imbued with a level of disrespect for other members. I mean, if that's the way he wants to go, I can do it to you, Speaker. Speaker, Speaker, all I'm saying, Speaker, I am Speaker. Keep quiet, please, while I'm trying to speak to Speaker. Please, Mr. Speaker. No, I'm serious with that, Speaker. The member is heckling, and I'm trying to speak to you. He can heckle all he wants, Mr. Speaker, all he wants. But I'm going to communicate with you, Speaker. Undeterred. Speaker, what I'm saying to you is that if we are allowed now to go down this road, I have no problem, Speaker, I could probably do better than 99.999% in this house. If that's the way we're going to do it. No problem. No problem, Speaker. But my understanding is that you treat members with respect. Now, if we're not going to do that, and if we're going to demean and create caricatures of each other, no problem, Mr. Speaker. But I know personally I won't stand for it. But if that's how I could do someone else, then I'll do that, Mr. Speaker. Fort Charlotte would be top of my list, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Honorable member Fangleston, I believe the difficulty we are experiencing here is that the subsequent remarks
Yes.
came after
Right.
sort of inflammatory remark that was withdrawn.
Right.
But I see nothing wrong with the second
Okay.
set of remarks.
Okay, Speaker.
And since the first remark was withdrawn,
Okay, Speaker.
I think that the member should continue.
I accept, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. But I just wish to have the honorable member know, as she said, I'll be top of a list. This is an Andre Rollins 2.0. Mr. Speaker, I am grateful for God having spared my life to be. I thought I said that very early, and I'm only saying the same. We should all be thankful for God having spared us from the people's wrath long enough to partake in his bounty under the Free National Movement, this new Free National Movement administration. Let me say I, too, like some of my colleagues, Mr. Speaker, would not have wanted the first vote on behalf of the good constituents of Fort Charlotte to be put towards a borrowing bill. But as we are all discovering, the previous administration left us with no choice at this current time. One of today's journals has as its headline, "A Pitch of Waste." And that's what we've been hearing, and that's sort of prompted this government to do and take the actions that it has. But suffice it to say, Mr. Speaker, in all that we are hearing, however some may want to put it, it would appear that monies are missing from the cookie jar. And the general perception is someone or somebody's took it and just seemed to be getting away with it. Bad debts, illegal contracts, crooked obligations, and crooked deals, they just get away with it. And then we have to borrow more money to make up for what they seem.
The chair recognizes the honorable member Ferguson.
Clear, because I'm not sure what the member is alluding to when he says crooked. He said that somebody. I'm just wondering. Be clear if the member could be. I think he should be specific. If he's alleging corruption on the part of any person, I think he should say who's being corrupt. Otherwise, he leaves. He suggests that it's a blanket of whoever, which might seek to include me, and I ain't gonna allow that, Mr. Speaker. So I'm asking the member to be specific about these allegations, not just blanket allegations about corruption and crooked, Mr. Speaker. Be specific.
Honorable member for Port Charlotte.
Mr. Speaker, I think over the past week or so, we've been hearing from the honorable member from East Grand Bahama. We've heard from the honorable member from Elizabeth and South Beach. We've heard from several others, instances where there are allegations of misappropriations and wastage. And this is all I'm saying, Mr. Speaker. I'm not, and I'm saying that in some ways it appears as if, this is what I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, that people are just walking away. Yeah, and this isn't new. This has been years. Before I came into government, I watched it. As a journalist at the Tribune, I covered it. So this isn't some fantasy that I'm making up. These are things that listen, Mr. Speaker, these are things that I know. I saw it investigated as a Tribune reporter, the supposed missing monies from the Housing Authority. So I've watched it too. So if the member, I don't want to sort of get into it with the member. I'm just saying it appears as if people are getting away. And that's the general perception in the community. I'm speaking in many instances on behalf of my constituents as well, their perception.
The chair recognizes the member Ferguson.
Because the member, I understand what the member is saying, his history as a journalist, but he's indicating that, or he's using his rationale, foundation of things that were said in here. I heard what was said in your speaker. Nothing has been laid in this parliament, but lots has been said. But I heard that it was said that contracts were done before an election, etc. But I don't think I heard anything in here that said somebody stole or misappropriated in this process. And so I'm just wondering, I think the member should withdraw that, because I don't think any member over there asserted something like that. They talked about how contracts were cut and where they were done, etc., etc. But to say monies were misappropriated in the process, I don't think that happened, Mr. Speaker. I'd ask the member to withdraw what he said in that regard, lest he give an impression that I don't think he really wants to give that impression, Speaker. No, he said, the Speaker.
The chair recognizes the member for Bamboo Town.
This is a good place and good time for us to suspend until 3 p.m. today, Thursday, June 5th, and 2017.
Honorable member. Yes, you cannot speak after a motion, and the motion has been put to suspend, and it's been seconded. It has been moved and seconded that the business of the House suspend until our honorable members. The chair is speaking. It has been moved and seconded that the business of the House suspend until 3 p.m. Those, as many as are in favor, will remain seated. Those who oppose will rise. The business of the House stands suspended until 3 p.m.